Good morning. It is just after 10 o'clock on April 22nd. We are here as the Joint Committee of the Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee and the Health and Human Services Committee, here with co-chair Councilmember Albernaz, and we are here with colleagues in the Health and Human Services and CEF, as well as DHCA and HOC and the executive branch, and we are going to talk about rental assistance programs that we have across county departments and agencies. I will open it up if Councilmember Albernaz has any initial comments, then we can turn it over to staff to walk us through.
We get started.
Great. Well, why don't we turn it over to council staff to walk us through the packet, and we can turn it over to our colleagues in the executive branch and HOC as needed.
Okay, good morning. So the purpose of today's work session is to review the HIF-funded rental assistance programs. The HIF is managed by DHCA. The funding goes towards HOC programs, HHS programs, as well as DHCA programs. As a matter of housekeeping, the broader HIF discussion will take place on Friday at the PHP committee, along with the DHCA operating budget, and as well as the broader HHS conversation, budget conversation will take place on Monday, the 28th, as part of the HHS committee. So for today, we're limited to what the HIF-funded programs are, the changes are in the budget, and I'll stop there and we can proceed after any opening remarks.
Great. All right.
Guess I'll start. Chelsea Andrews, president of HOC. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. Of course, this funding is much needed and greatly appreciated. I see that there is a recommendation for a slight increase to account for inflation. That's definitely appreciated. And again, these programs, our programs include the Rent Supplement Program, the Move Up Initiative, the Community Choice Homes Initiative, and Youth Bridge Initiative. They're all very discrete programs that help specific populations that need additional support. So in addition to our voucher program, which you all are very familiar with, that has funding from the federal government, programs like these and the investment that the county has made in ensuring that we're able to provide support to these specific populations is greatly appreciated, and I'm open for any questions that you may have.
Great. Thank you.
Good morning, council members. Thank you for the opportunity to be here for this conversation about the emergency rent or different types of rental assistance. My name is Scott Bruton. I am the director of the Department of Housing and Community Affairs. DHCA's Chief of Finance and Administration is going to provide a little overview of the DHCA aspects of what's being considered today.
Good morning, council member. This is Bofin Salem from DHCA. For the rental assistance program has been consistently that we use the recognition tax premium to provide funding support for 3 departments, HOC, HHS, and DHCA to support any services or program related with rental assistance, rental subsidy, especially to support low-income household that they can retain their housing. And so for based on whatever finances the projection on the revenue for FY26, we see a slightly increase, so we are able to support each agencies with 3% inflation adjustment. So pretty much not big changes. The only difference is because the agreement between HHS and the DHCA that we are taking over one of their program, so we want to put in a more formal agreement with HUI through our rental agreement, so we can continue to provide the support for any kind of rental assistance units that they anticipate to create going forward. Otherwise, pretty much consistent with the commitment that we provided for 3 agencies.
Good morning, Council Vice President Juwando and Council Joint Committee members joining us this morning. I just want to personally thank, as the Director of Health and Human Services, James Bridgers, our partners who are at the table today. There's an immediate threat to housing and supportive housing, not only in the county, but at a national and state level. And so what you see before you is a package that supports what we intend to do to help those who are in need for either short-term housing, rental assistance, or rapid rehousing. And I'll turn it over to Ms. Hung, who can really delineate some of those programs that we need support. And not only the HIF and Department of Housing and Community Affairs, but within the Department of Health and Human Services.
Thank you, Dr. Bridgers. Thank you, Joint Committee. I'm so glad to be here and so thankful for your ongoing support of the county's commitment to provide the rental assistance, especially to our most vulnerable households. And for SEF, this means that the funding pays for our permanent supportive housing programs, which are for disabled households, as well as our rapid rehousing for those who can increase their earned income. And then our shallow subsidy rental assistance program, I know it has a similar name to the RAP funding, but that's also so important for those who are disabled, those who are older adults, to keep them housed. And then lastly, our eviction prevention. So I just want to underscore the importance of this funding and the continuation of it, and also to say that, as Dr. Bridgers mentioned, we know from the point in time count this January that our numbers continue to rise amongst the not just individual households, but also families, which we've seen over the last 2 years. So we expect to see, and these numbers will be published in May, but nearly a doubling of families experiencing homelessness. So our commitment to provide these housing interventions remains critical, and we are here to answer your questions, but I want to thank you for all of your support of this funding.
Great. Well, we've heard from everybody. We have a couple options before us from the council staff that we can talk through and discuss. And then we can also just open it up in general if any colleagues have comments. But essentially, and staff can speak to these, and I think we can hear from the partners who are here to let us know what the impact would be on some of these decisions. I think would be helpful. But essentially 2 recommendations related to funding, one the contingency question and the other of whether to allocate funding to replace federal dollars that have are no longer available, that have been utilized up to this point with general fund dollars, or whether we would take money out of the Housing Initiative Fund in order to fund that.
Right.
So if you want to speak to that.
Sure, absolutely. So yeah, as noted in the packet, the executive has certain recommended increases, detailed, nothing controversial there. We mentioned a shift of the HUI contract from DHS to DHCA, that's why the DHS portion is going down and the DHCA portion is increasing. With regards to contingency, the executive is recommending a contingency level of $2.6 million. Typically, the contingency is there at the 10% level, roughly, to account for any volatile revenue shortfalls from recordation taxes. So that's typically how DHC would program in the recommended budget. There is a discussion there to be had as to whether to reduce the contingency to, say, 5%, which would free up roughly $1.2 million, which can then be used to fund, to increase funding for the HHS portion, for example, rapid rehousing. Some of those programs also receive general fund dollars, so one option would be to directly offset those general fund dollars and thus freeing up resources for the competition list. Another option would be to simply reduce contingency and increase, add to the HHS programs to increase services and service levels. This is a strategy we did 2 years ago when the recordation tax bill was approved. We had projected additional resources, and we were able to use those additional recordation taxes in the HIF to offset general fund dollars. So what I'm suggesting is we could discuss a similar strategy for this year. I'll stop there.
What's the actual recordation tax experience over the last decade? I mean, if the contingency, has been programmed at 10%, the recommendation here is 5%. Do we have a use case over the last 10 years or 15 years that, lets us know what it has been each year and what we should expect?
Yes, I think historically, we have been assumed about 10% from the contingency as a cushion. For instance, because during the fiscal year, it could have a lot of housing opportunities pop up, and DACA want to have the some sort of resources that we can react to enter negotiation, especially for some kind of rental agreement, the new rental agreement, then we need this part of the money to fulfill some of the housing goal that we intended to achieve, especially if we want to provide more units, affordable units for low-income residents. If we look at the projection for recognition tax premium, I think the budget is pretty much aligned what finance is provided. However, if you recall, a couple of years ago, especially FY22, the recognition tax premium, the actual revenue can back much lower, and that really, whatever the assumed contingency is not there. And so we really had to struggle to make sure all the committed services for that particular year that have the resources there. So the policy or the approach is we try to maintain the committed services throughout the year, because market is so volatile, and the contingency, if the actual revenue did not come in as what we projected and approved in the budget, we want to make sure we have the resources there to support the committed services.
I'll just add that if we find that the revenues do come in as expected or come in higher than expected, then we can work together with CEF to determine how to spend that money. This is not money that would just stay in a, sorry, I almost said lockbox, but to stay segregated out from being used. This is money that could be used in the third and fourth quarters of the year if we're seeing that revenues do come in. And as Ms. Salem noted, we could use it for things such as, say, HUI, which they normally do, buy one or two houses to convert into group houses. What we do, she mentioned rental agreements. Part of the reason that HUI's contract is moving over to us is that CEF doesn't really, except for the HUI long-term contract, doesn't really do rental agreements, whereas DHCA does long-term rental agreements. So it made sure to fit there. And HUI, as it grows, we're always seeing an expansion. Or if we see examples where we could preserve affordability in a property by doing a rental agreement, we would have those funds to be able to do so. That said, we would always talk with CEF about this, and if CEF if we knew that the funds were going to be there in the contingency funds were going to be available for us, then we would also talk with CEF and see what their spend down rate for their existing programs were and determine if that money should be transferred over there. So the programs that are covered in, in this part of the HIF, the money will get spent. It's just a matter of when the commitment is made. Do we make the commitment up front now without the contingency, or do we have the flexibility halfway or three-quarters of the way through the year to determine what is the best use at the time?
Appreciate that. I think it would be helpful for us to get the last 10 years or 15 years, pick a point in time that seems reasonable and appropriate, and let us know what the numbers have come in based on the projection, because what we've projected every year is really less relevant to what has actually happened every year. So not the budgeted amount, but the actual amount, I think would be helpful. I'll just speak for myself before turning to colleagues. I would be uncomfortable at this point reallocating this funding, and obviously there are huge needs. We have major asks. We've heard from folks here. The money will be spent, so it's not an issue of whether or not this money will be spent that we just heard. I do think that DHCA and CEF should be working with the council on that, so I would recommend, if we don't move forward, that at the fiscal update, which is a good point in time in December, that's when we are already looking at how revenues are coming in, including recordation tax, et cetera, that you come to us, not just as part of the macro level, but the micro level of, exactly what the departments are discussing and expecting, and that the council be part of those discussions, and perhaps in the early part of the new year, we can have a joint committee session to discuss how those funds would be allocated. So if we don't move forward in that, and we'll see where other folks are, I do think that the council needs to play a role. The funds should be spent, but they should be spent with our budget authority, and not as just an extra account to, do priorities that the council is not privy to or involved in. So let me turn it over to colleagues, Council Vice President Jawanda. Let me turn it to the co-chair first, and then I'll turn it to Council Vice President Jawanda.
All right. Good morning, everyone. So just for a little bit of context and background, just to go over the data and sort of where things are now. We've heard within HHS committee sessions the growing need. We're all familiar with it. We're all feeling it. We've heard numerous times from constituents who are in crisis. But if we could just pause for a moment and describe the picture currently as it stands today. So we're hovering at around 4.5, coming close to 5% unemployment. Things had settled somewhat since COVID, although we were still not at pre-COVID levels in terms of eviction rates. We know things are about to get infinitely worse. How worse is the only question, based on the federal reductions, more and more people losing their jobs. And we obviously have as strong an infrastructure as I think most reasonable people could ask for here in Montgomery County through the partnership of CEF, HHS, our incredible nonprofit organizations, and of course our public sector. But could somebody just describe for me where we are in terms of eviction rates, what we are seeing? We heard the statistic earlier, which we more than doubled the amount of people who were counted as recently as last year in homelessness. We know the rates of families are increasing. But if we could just pause for a moment and hear a little bit more about that context and where we are programmatically to reach those people.
My apologies. I don't have the eviction numbers ready today, but I can present them on Monday if that would be allowable, or I could provide them after this meeting. I have numbers of homeless, so I prepared just broadly, without giving the exact numbers, our PIT count from January, which is a reflection of those who are entering the system as a result of eviction. One of the things I would comment related to eviction is there's a limit to the number of evictions that the sheriff's office can do. So it's not necessarily, which in many ways I'm thankful for, because they can only conduct a certain number, and therefore even though there are there's tens of thousands where there are eviction filings every year, 40,000 on average, not all of those get to the point of executing the eviction, and also there's the limiting factor of how many they can actually execute. So I just want to state that first, but I can provide the exact numbers year to date next week, if that's okay.
That would be helpful, just to again see where we are. We know what's coming, as I said, but seeing where we are currently is relevant to the discussion we're having right now. And we want as many options as possible moving forward, because while things are challenging, they're about to get worse. And so we want to make sure that we're we spread out as few resources as we have, as strategically as possible.
If you'd like, I could do a broad overview of our homeless numbers, if that would be a helpful picture. So last year when we did the point-in-time count, we had 1,144 people that we counted January 24th, 2024. This year, we counted approximately 1,500. And so overall, there is a 32% increase in homelessness from last year to this year. What is really concerning, it's all concerning, however, the number of families experiencing homelessness has doubled from last year to this year. Last year, we had about 100 family households. This year, we had about 200 family households. Now, that is concerning because homelessness is so very disruptive to a family system, and more than half of the people in those families are children. So we're talking about our most vulnerable individuals. Also, amongst individuals experiencing homelessness, they tend to be older adults, people with disabilities, people with severe behavioral health, and so just overall, that 1,500 is very, very troubling, which is why we have to continue to double down on our interventions, like SHARP, which will be prepared on Monday to share our very exciting results. I can say we've housed, with the support of the supplemental appropriation provided, 80 families as of last Friday using that SHARP funding. So we've already decreased the number of families in our system from 200 to about 150. So, and there continues to be inflow of families each month, many of whom are first-time homeless, which I'll talk about more next week as well. But the factors we're talking about, the increasing amount of job instability, the increasing rents, the inflation, the loss of the federal COVID dollars, it's all working against our families, and it's showing up in our numbers, which I'll talk about in detail next week.
Dr. Bridgers, you were going to say something?
Again, good morning, Councilmember Alvin. I was just looking at my notes. I wanted to go back to Councilmember Friedson's question, and I asked the council and council staff to help us as partner as we work through budget scenarios with OMB. Could we get some budgetary frameworks or thresholds around the ceilings that Councilmember Friedson talked about with the actuals over time, historical crosswalk of the recordation tax, just to give us, when we have a work session later on in the year, to come prepared with some scenarios to present to council working with OMB. Just asking that question. Sorry to break from protocol, because I know the QA is on y'all from us, but I wanted to put that back while I was fresh. So thank you.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate that overview, Chief Hong. It gives a picture, the bleak picture of what's before us right now, and again, what's coming. Just to connect a couple of dots. So, by the way, shout out to a group of passionate and well-informed advocates that I had the opportunity to meet with earlier this week that shared some very troubling stories that are consistent with other stories we've heard out in the community. And of course, we all want to do everything that we can to address this issue, as complex it is and as it's growing. But moving forward and post-budget, because we're talking about this in terms of housing, fundamental issue, critical, but we haven't, I think, done enough to talk about workforce development. And actually, serendipitously, Mr. Hall from Interfaith Works met with me regarding a concept for an initiative that he's interested in expanding, which is going to be difficult as part of the budget process and where we are with that process. But we have to take the long view here. And I know my colleagues in the Economic Development Committee, led by our incredible chair, Councilmember Fanny Gonzalez, have talked about this, and we've had really robust discussions in the area of youth development and workforce development among our youth. This is a population that obviously we also need to be very sensitive to the unique sets of challenges that folks in these situations are in. And so that's a subsequent conversation that we have to have, but I don't think we can have this one without that one going forward. So with that, I yield to you, Mr. Chair, and look forward to other questions from colleagues.
Thank you. Council Vice President Juando.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. I'm glad that I went after Chair Albornoz, because he teed up things really nicely. I think many of us this week or soon will have met with this coalition of folks that are particularly advocating around rental assistance. I was just at a bill signing with council members Mink and Lukey that will allow consumer protection laws to be used when homes aren't habitable for that small amount of landlords that aren't doing what they're supposed to do. But I reminded folks there that, we're approaching 40% of our community are renters, and that is a nearly 400,000 people if you take our population. And so even if you have a small subset of that not doing what they're supposed to do, you're talking about tens of thousands of people. And I guarantee you, if you crosswalk that list to the list of new families that are homeless or experiencing homelessness, there's going to be some overlap. So it underscores that all these things are connected, and we are in a difficult spot. But I do feel very confident and thankful that we have a strong infrastructure, a strong commitment Whether it was in COVID, how much money we committed through the federal dollars, the work that Seth and all of you all are doing. I know we're doing better than others. But again, we have to be our own standard setters. That's the Montgomery County challenge of, we can't accept a doubling in family homelessness and not respond. And I know we are responding. That's great news around SHARP. That's why that money was needed. And I think that type of result in that time period is, you kind of glossed over it, Christine, because you're just like grizzled in the work here, but that's a significant accomplishment. So I want to, this 80, you said reduced from 150 families to 80, you reduced, is that correct? Or you reduced the number to 80?
Yeah, we reduced so we had, at the earlier part of the year, had 200 families in our motels and shelters, and we've housed through the SHARP program 80 families since the supplemental appropriation was approved. So our current number is around 150, but that's because there's continual inflow into the system. Yeah, we have to account for that. But it is incredible work. I'm so proud of the team. It's across 3 divisions of SEF. It's housing, it's prevention, because we're trying to identify the families as soon as they're presenting so that they're not having to be in shelter long term, as well as our family services. They've been working so collaboratively and just putting on housing fairs for the families, with property managers coming so they could apply right there. And so they've been working very diligently since the council approved the appropriation. So it really has been a team effort. We couldn't have done it with all your support. With that unanimous vote, I am so thankful for that.
Well, thank you for providing a little more context, and thank you to you and your team for all that work. One of the things that I would also like to see, I agree with Chair Friedson that at this moment, I don't think we should reallocate. We should get a little more on the trends. You all are sitting next to each other because you work well together. So I think in the short term and like in the next year, I trust that you will make those allocations. If you get a big deal, you'll talk about it. You'll communicate with us. I also agree that it should be communicated back to us about what you intend to do from a budgetary standpoint. But I feel comfortable that knowing that money will go to good use. But in addition to that, I would be interested to see and have a little more analysis maybe on Monday. Is that a morning meeting or is that an afternoon meeting? I don't know, because I know it's an HHS.
Afternoon.
Is it afternoon?
1:30 to 3:30?
1:34.
Okay. Well, we have a PHP at the same time. That's why I was saying. So I won't be able to be there, but I'll make sure my staff is monitoring and maybe submit a few questions. But I would love to see that information, and included in that, not only where the evictions are, but what the current county executive's budget proposal, which you'll be going over that day, for the SEF programs, what dent would that make in your mind, right? Best you can. And then what the delta is between, and again, knowing we don't know exactly how bad it's going to get or how quickly, but we do know that it's getting worse. Just what resources would mean, how many more folks we would be able to cover or prevent. We also heard very compelling testimony from folks in support of Interfaith Works, where you know a little bit about that from your previous time, and some of their programs that are able to intervene a little sooner in the process. And so what we're trying to figure out is, as we head into this coming storm, we're already in it, but as it gets worse, what are the things that we should be thinking about where we can allocate resources, either in our nonprofit sector partners, to SEF and others, and what that means as far as the return on investment. And then investment in this case is keeping people housed. And so, like the numbers you gave us with SHARP, to the extent that you can, providing that context, is that a reasonable ask? Is that something that you could?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. And I really appreciate you naming that the investment in prevention and housing is really where we want to be. We spend so much of our funding on our emergency response. That's our shelters and our motels, and we have to. But that is not where we want to invest most of our funds. We want to invest in keeping families in their homes before it becomes a crisis for them. So I really appreciate you tuning into that, and for all of you for your support in understanding that that's where we want to focus our funding.
Great. I appreciate that. And who knows, this budget situation we're in is pretty pretty fluid right now, to probably say an understatement, as far as revenues and where things are going to go. And so I think having that as a part of our larger discussions as we head into the storm that Councilman Ramos talked about will be helpful, and we can see what we got to do this year, but also going forward. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Let me turn it over to co-chair, wants to chime in again, and then turn it to Councilmember Fontaine.
Yeah, I should have mentioned in my comments, I agree with the chair as well and Councilmember Gimondo for the moment on not supporting reallocation and giving us more flexibility moving forward.
Appreciate that. Councilmember Fontaine Gonzalez.
Thank you. Good morning. Also, let me just put it out there before I forget. I also agree with the chairman, the two chairs, and Council Vice President Yowando. Couple of things. One, I want to thank the HHS committee. I've been getting all these different calls about people who are about to be homeless, or they're homeless right now. And last week was really heartbreaking. It was a person, his stepfather called me. This person has a disability, and basically you guys helped me deal with the adult foster care system, and now he's housed. Thank you for doing all that. I received a really heartwarming letter from the father, and I'm going to share that with you guys, because it's important to remember the good things that we're doing, and at least it gives me hope. So I'm going to put that out there. Second, obviously, these numbers are going to increase drastically, especially people from other jurisdictions that are coming to Montgomery County. I'm just not going to name them, but it's going to happen. It's happening already. And we got to walk the talk and embrace our values, and make sure that, especially with children, as you're saying, the most vulnerable, we got to protect them, because that's how we do things in Montgomery County. So once you come back with data, I really want to understand more. When we housed somebody, how long does the family stay in that situation? What are we doing to really make sure that they have a permanent home and not just staying in a motel for a few months? Because that's just a little Band-Aid, which reminds me of the need of increasing and creating more housing. And I look forward to more data, really, to connect the dots and understand the situation right now, and share that data with COG, the regional organization of local governments, and see what else they're doing that we're not doing, because this is an issue that we should be working in conjunction and in coordination. I think we're leading among them, but I also know that, they're probably doing things that we're not doing. So having that coordination is more important now than ever before, based on what's happening at the federal level. And I wanna understand how often you're talking to your counterparts in, not just within Maryland, but in DC, Washington, DC, and Virginia. So that will be very helpful for me. And I look forward to also the funding conversation in December that we'll have.
Thank you, Councilmember. Fanny Gonzalez, just for your information, your situational awareness, Ms. Hung and I are members of the COGS Human Services. We have the report. We're always talking about the homeless challenges that we have, not only in Montgomery County, but in the region. Of course, as Council Vice President Jawando say, they want to replicate what we do. So, we provide them with the best practice or better practices for what we're doing, but that's just not enough. And so we can continue to share reports with the committee members just for your situational awareness, just to enhance and increase your knowledge of what we're doing in partnership with our regional partners.
Thank you. And I did want to add that one of the areas in which Montgomery County has been a leader is by joining the Built for Zero movement, which is trying to end homelessness by reaching so-called functional zero. And Montgomery County has been part of that movement for more than 10 years. And one of our early successes was reaching functional zero for veterans at the end of 2015. So there is a precedent for setting milestones in ending homelessness or reaching functional zero. And that is something that the Council of Governments has recently signed on to for all of the other jurisdictions who have not been part of that movement. So it's really exciting because what it means is we'll be setting regional goals in reducing homelessness. Yeah, it's something that we very much have needed because we know that homelessness doesn't have boundaries. I'm sorry if it is, yeah. So it's something that's really important that we're looking forward to. And in addition to that, Montgomery County is part of a triad with the district as well as Prince George's County to share data so that we can do more case conferencing for folks who have connections to other jurisdictions, and all of us see it. So that's a collaboration that is developing, and we are currently working on a data warehouse between the 3 jurisdictions to share that data. So those are 2 things that we're doing collaboratively across the region and with our neighboring jurisdictions.
Great. Councilmember Lukey.
Thank you. Thank you for all that you do, and I greatly appreciate, and as Councilmember Fanny Gonzalez noted, we do need to prioritize, especially our families with children. So back to the data piece, because each one of our offices gets lots of calls for people who need assistance, and I want to thank all of you for always being good partners in that work. And then there are some where we're not going to be able to help, right? Or there are other conditions or circumstances that mean it's sort of beyond our county or our offices to assist with. And that's unfortunate. But I wanted to know how you utilize the State Department of Housing and Community Development's evictions dashboard, because that was a critical project for the Access to Justice Commission that I served on in my prior role, and I served on the data and legal technology team. So that was a really big deal for us to get that passed in 2022, and a top priority for my prior boss, former Attorney General Frosch. And so since the judiciary has been collecting that information and populating that dashboard since January 1st, 2023, I wanted to know what you've been able to glean from utilizing the data. And also, to your point about there's no boundaries around this, how in examining surrounding jurisdictions data, what you're seeing. What is the story that's being told by the data and analysis that you're able to do working with that? Thank you for that question. So the data that the state provides is valuable in seeing whether our trends with evictions are consistent with those statewide. So to look at them is helpful, and to see that, in fact, evictions, an increase in evictions, an increase in housing instability isn't just occurring in Montgomery County, it's occurring across the state. And the same with the data that they collect. They similar to the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments also are collecting point-in-time count data for state jurisdictions. So when you look at the data across the state, all of the counties' homeless numbers are trending upwards and have been. Now, that is as of the 2024 point-in-time count. Everyone's still cleaning their data and preparing it for May for the 2025 point-in-time count. But as of last year, the jurisdictions across the state we're all seeing an increase in homelessness. And that was also the case with the Metropolitan Washington regions, which include Northern Virginia, except for there's one outlier, which was our Fairfax County had a modest decrease last year. But I expect to see similar numbers this year because it is a national crisis with housing and a regional issue, certainly. As far as homelessness, really, it's just nationwide homelessness numbers are increasing. So it's very helpful to see the data, to have that context across the state. And then in addition to that, I'm sorry, I'm pivoting to the second part of your question, which was related to, do you mind The first part was about how you specifically use DHCD's data dashboard, because we've got 2 full calendar years worth of data statewide on there,
Right.
broken out by jurisdiction. And because it talks about like there is supposed to be information in there that's relevant to evictions that are actually carried out. Like as we've talked about,
Right.
there's a high number of evictions filed, so it's kind of like a funnel, right? You're up here
Yes.
with the number, but the actual execution is down here.
Yes.
In the middle is a lot of anxiety and instability, but not the same type of instability that happens once you get to the bottom of the funnel and the eviction is executed.
Yes.
Right? And so, and I know, everyone up here is working on different aspects of how to prevent and intervene across that different point in the funnel. And what I'm trying to find out, and evictions is one piece of it, but foreclosure is another. And even back in 2021, when we were starting to pick through these things, both aspects were things that with respect to the Access to Justice Commission, where focus is. What's going on in the foreclosure world? What is or isn't happening? What notices are happening? What type of outreach is being given in that context in order to help intervene so that foreclosure doesn't actually become final, right?
Yes.
And then the eviction piece is the other part. So it is both a renter and an owner problem that leads to the increased homelessness numbers.
Agreed.
Right. And what also is not clear from what has happened, because at the same time that we've seen financial instability that's impacting the number of foreclosures, the number of evictions, and those types of things, we've also seen an increase in behavioral health issues and substance use disorder, right? And so what's not clear are what are the causes or coexisting causes that lead to that. And if we're not doing that type of analysis, we're not going to get to fixing the problem or diminishing the impact. And that's what I'm wanting you all to speak to.
Yeah, so we certainly do track and assess the causes of homelessness, and I can present that as well on Monday.
Okay.
To see what the overwhelming cause of the homeless is, and I would say it's different amongst families and individuals.
Sure.
Amongst individuals, we see more long-term chronic homelessness, and more disability.
Right.
So yes, I can provide that. It certainly is really important to understanding how we prevent more people from entering into homelessness, which is our goal. And I know that though we do have some households that come to us in foreclosure, the vast majority who
renters.
seek our housing
Yeah.
stabilization services are renters
Right.
facing eviction. Yes.
Okay, thank you. No, I really appreciate that. And in the interim between now and Monday, I'll go back through myself and dig through the dashboard. Even this morning when I was trying to pull it up, it's not on the Access to Justice Commission's website anymore. It's on DHCD. So if anybody out there, as Council Vice President Jawando likes to say, for the millions watching at home, it's on the DHCD website. It's called the Landlord and Tenant Eviction Dashboard.
Thank you. Councilmember Sales.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to you all for trying to tackle this ongoing problem that continues to grow. I too met with some of the advocates from the Housing Justice Coalition and just wanted to better understand how we're prioritizing ADA enhancements in some of these affordable housing communities. And just wanted to better understand, because if we're looking at a 3% inflationary adjustment, I mean, the numbers that they proposed to us were, I think it was less than 200,000 to retrofit some of these affordable housing units. So before we decide on this inflationary adjustment and the other items, I just wanted to better understand, have we calculated how much these improvements would cost, and do we have a list of ADA accessible affordable housing apartments that are available for recommendation when we're identifying where our, I guess, rapid rehousing or, low-income residents can go?
Yeah, so it is the property manager's responsibility to retrofit units to respond to a reasonable accommodation. It's not generally something we have to do. Sometimes we have to work with DHCA, when if a tenant needs a reasonable accommodation and the landlord is not following through on that. Having said that, if we're talking about, because
These are the properties that were grandfathered. So I guess they were too old and they don't have to comply with the ADA regulations. Are you aware of any properties that don't have to comply with ADA regulations?
I can check with our Office of Landlord and Tenant Affairs, and we can
Okay.
get back to you with any data that we might have.
Good. Okay, I would appreciate it. And as we're looking at the information about, why people are facing homelessness, that'll be interesting to see. I'm not hearing a lot about how we're working with financial management and, teaching, whether it's fiscal management, mental health. I'm not sure what that program looks like. The people that we are rapidly rehousing are putting in affordable housing. How long are they staying there? And then, do we see a drop off, or do we see patterns of, inability to pay again? Like, I'm not understanding what's working, what's not working with people facing chronic homelessness, or those who are, getting thousands of dollars behind in their rent, and why we're coming in so late, or why they're notifying us so late. So there were just so many different stories that we heard during the public testimony last 2 weeks ago. So
Yeah, and each situation has its own complexities and is nuanced, and every case is unique. But I can say that for those who are chronically homeless, those are people who are typically who have a disability and have had a long-term experience of homelessness, which usually exacerbates their disabilities, whether it's a chronic health condition, a physical disability, or severe behavioral health. So what is needed for them to be successful in housing is the supportive services. And that's why the permanent supportive housing intervention that I often talk about is so important to continue to fund, and as rents go up, to provide the additional funding to cover those rents, because these are individuals who will struggle to remain housed without the supportive services. So yeah, I urge the council to, I know we will talk about this next week, but
Yes.
to continue to support that housing intervention. It is 98% successful as far as retention rates. It's a very, very important housing program for folks who are chronically homeless. And then I think you also asked about rapid rehousing. So
Yes.
rapid rehousing is specifically for households that are able to increase their earned income. And the way Montgomery County has set up its rapid rehousing program is to not only provide intensive case management so that the household can be connected to services quickly, but also an employment specialist who works intensively with the household to increase their earned income. And this is an intervention that works well with families who are often less vulnerable, and that intensive employment work is important because many of the households that come to us have come with no income, and so they need that support. And the employment specialist also works with them on developing their financial skills. Many of the families we see are new parents, are younger, and need that support in developing those skills. So it's definitely something that's needed and that our workers provide to those who are experiencing homelessness. What we would like to do, if we're able to expand our partnerships with our housing stabilization, is to offer it to all the households that come for housing stabilization. Currently, our case managers can do that. They are trained to provide that, but we would like to work with a partner that provides it, similar to the City of Gaithersburg program, which is really, really effective. So we're looking to expand our partnerships there if we're able.
Okay, and I know you had to make some cuts to some of the program managers. What's the caseload now for the case managers now? How many families, individuals what's the average caseload?
So, and this is this for our housing programs or for housing stabilization?
Housing stabilization.
Yes, so it's open-ended. We have to serve the need, so there is no set caseload. And I have to say, I do the exit interviews for everyone at SEF, including those who have been with us for 30 plus years. And the demand on them is high because of that. And so last year we had a net loss of 20 staff because our COVID funding went away. But that definitely, what happened was that the existing staff had to carry the same burden. So we are challenged there, but we have excellent and super dedicated staff.
How big is the staff now with that
right
loss?
Now, I want to say we have about, I couldn't give you the exact number, but in Silver Spring, Rockville, and Germantown, I believe we have a team of 15
Total. Or at each location?
At each, those are our workers. That includes triage. We have, and then case management.
Case management.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Mink.
Thank you. Appreciate the sentiments of all my colleagues. And I'll just add that, and thank you all for the work that you all do in this space, that the investments that we make, as we've discussed before in regards to, the appropriation back in December, that the investments, the dollars in this space are some of the most not only most needed, but most cost effective investments that we can make, because it's when we fail to make the adequate investments in this space, that's when we start to have much more expensive effects, obviously on the human side, but also even purely from a fiscal perspective, with our very much overburdened shelter system, with the hotels, but also in ways that are more indirect costs, both to the families as well as to the county and the services that we provide. So dollars that we are able to put into the space to keep people in stable housing, to keep people in their homes, are very much dollars well spent. And at this time, more than any other in recent history, that's going to be very, very true. So I really appreciate my colleagues for the emphasis that they're putting on this funding. Thanks.
Appreciate that. All right, we've heard from colleagues. It seems like there is a consensus that we appreciate the staff recommendation on the contingency, but that's not something that we're interested at this point. I would ask that we take note on the December fiscal update and come back with a report on where things are, and perhaps look to schedule a joint committee meeting in early part of the new year, middle of January, ideally, if we can, when we get back into session to discuss the use of funds, or if there aren't as many funds as we anticipate, how we're going to fund these needs that are greater than the resources that are available. There's also an additional recommendation that we didn't speak directly to on money out of the HIF. I'll just note my view on that. I'm not enthusiastic about taking money away from affordable housing programs in order to fund that. It seemed like that's a similar sentiment from what I heard from colleagues, and so I'm seeing nodding heads, and without objection, the consensus of the Joint Committee is to accept the county executive's recommended budget here. So without objection, we will accept the county executive's recommended budget on these HIF-funded programs, and we will forward that along to the full council. With that, with appreciation to all of the team who is here, this shows the coordinated effort that county government is taking to try to address these serious issues. I also, like colleagues, met with many of the advocates and those who are impacted by these issues and heard their compelling stories. Appreciate the courage that it takes to share those personal stories, which is not an easy thing to do, and is shared on behalf of many others facing and experiencing some of these challenges. And really appreciate not only those who are here today, but all of the teams that you are here representing, who are on the front lines doing this work each and every day, which is really grueling and challenging and emotionally difficult work that we know that many of our county employees and other volunteers and our partner organizations take home with them. It keeps them up at night. It haunts them in the morning. And we just very much appreciate all of that work and that effort. So with that, we have a joint committee recommendation unanimously without objection, and we are adjourned.